begins. Question orale. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Procurement Minister told this House that the government did not have a deal for ventilators with their Liberal friend Frank Baylis, but she forgot to add that Baylis is a partner in the deal. Baylis makes the ventilators. In fact, the ventilators are called the Baylis ventilator, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister ask his former MP, Frank Baylis, to change the name of the Baylis ventilator so that his minister did not mislead this House?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from day one, we engaged Canadians across the country to step up in their businesses to contribute to the efforts we all knew we needed to do to deliver, including many former politicians and known partisan supporters stepped up across the country, like all Canadians. One well-known Conservative businessman named Rick Jameson stepped up because he was a successful auto parts manufacturer and wanted to contribute to the efforts we made to deliver ventilators. He reached out, contracted to Baylis Medical because they could deliver the parts that would help him deliver ventilators. Our agreement with the government, as a government, is with FTI, Rick Jameson's company.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It seems it is who you know in the PMO, Mr. Speaker. Nous savons que l'entreprise Baylis.
We know that the Baylis company copied the ventilator model from an Irish company. And yet Baylis charged more than $100 million more than his competitor. It costs less, yet he charges more. What a remarkable deal for the Liberal family. Why is there a different set of rules for friends of the Liberals than for all other Canadians? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I think the Leader of the Opposition finds himself in a difficult position because nobody in this House would accuse Rick Peterson, a well-known Conservative, Rick Jameson rather. I'm sorry, I'm not that familiar with him because he's a Conservative businessman. It is my friends across the aisle who should know him. But he's the one who signed a contract with the Government of Canada to deliver ventilators. And he worked with a Liberal who has a company that's working really well. But really, the question is for Mr. Jameson as to why he chose Baylis to work with, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, we learned that the Liberal government is influencing the judicial nominations process, one that should be free from bias. In fact, he even uses the list of Liberal donors to decide who will become a judge. Once again, Mr. Speaker, why is there one process for Liberal lawyers and a completely different process for everyone else? The Honourable Prime Minister. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, we created a merit-based process for all Canadians, regardless of their political affiliation. Judges are chosen by an independent committee based on merit. Of course, we always look at the choices after, but the judges are chosen based on merit, and they are also chosen based on diversity, including political diversity. But ultimately, the most important thing is that they offer legal advice that reflects the reality of Canada.
The Minister is telling Canadians to trust him. There's no influence. The stories in the paper are false, that he would never interfere in the independence of the justice system. Sound familiar, Mr. Speaker? Canadians have seen this movie before. It's called PMO Ethics Violation 2, Revenge of SNC Lavalin. With this Prime Minister, the scandal sequels are as spine-tingling as the original. So again, Mr. Speaker, why are there one set of rules for Liberal lawyers and one set of rules for everyone else?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that's simply not true. We brought in a merit-based appointment system after having had a government under the Conservatives that had highly torqued all of its judicial nominations processes. We brought in a merit-based process that is better set to reflect the full diversity of this country. Independent judicial advisory committees across the country make recommendations to the judiciary. We will always look to appoint appoint the very best people to the judiciary. That's what Canadians expect, while they also expect that they be the reflection of the diversity of this country.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, when the COVID crisis hit, this government was late with closing the border. They've been late with rapid tests, and now it seems the government will be late with the delivery of vaccines to Canadians. Will the Prime Minister tell this House why he signed a contract that guarantees that Canada will be at the back of the line when it comes to the vaccine rollout?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, that's simply not true. From the very beginning, we acted quickly on countering this pandemic as best as we possibly could. From early January, the Public Health Advisory Board was in place talking about the rumours and the concerns around a virus coming out of China. We then had emergency meetings. We then were able to deliver direct help to Canadians within mere weeks after the shutdown, something that the Conservatives have pointed out was far too quick. Our priorities should have been elsewhere, maybe with big businesses rather than helping families. And on the vaccines, we have continued to move forward to make sure that Canadians have access to vaccines.
L'honorable député de Bel.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. During the crisis with Indigenous peoples, the Prime Minister clearly stated that one does not send in the army against one's own population. And yet, during the October crisis, that was exactly what happened. There were nearly 500 unwarranted arrests, people who were held, cut off from their families, who never received compensation. Does the principle that the current Prime Minister has expressed, should that have been applied by Prime Minister Trudeau in Quebec in 1980? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. During the October crisis, the Quebec minister was playing ball in Saint-Lambert with his nephew innocently one evening, and he was kidnapped and assassinated by a terrorist cell. Mr. Speaker, those are the events from the October crisis that we should remember. Of course, there will always be political debates about what happened. But let us remember that a Quebec politician was kidnapped and assassinated under horrendous circumstances, and we must remember him, his service, and his family. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, I asked a question on one topic, and he answers about a different topic, just as I expected. There were raids sponsored by Ottawa that recall the raids that occurred in the communist era Soviet Union. There were tens and thousands of questionings, arbitrary arrests. Does this Prime Minister deny that the RCMP had expressly recommended to the government that it should not proceed, that it wasn't justified? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, in October 1970, the Premier of Quebec, as well as the Leader of the Opposition, René Lévesque, agreed that it was a good idea to send in the troops to protect Quebec. In fact, the Mayor of Montreal asked the federal government to send in federal troops under Quebec stewardship to ensure the safety of the province during a democratic crisis, a crisis for the Quebec nation, and that is what the federal government did. It always wished to be there to help the provinces, as it will always wish to do. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South. Thank you. Stephen Harper cut funding for healthcare, and this Prime Minister has continued down that same path. As a result, long-term care centres don't have the resources they need. They did not have those resources during the first wave of COVID-19. Lives were lost. Will this Prime Minister commit today to ensure the appropriate funding to take care of our seniors? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, in this pandemic, tragically, the most vulnerable members of our society, seniors, were adversely affected by this crisis. We must all work together. All stripes of government and all levels of government must work together to keep our seniors healthy and safe. That is why we worked closely with the Quebec government to ensure that they have appropriate PPE. We even sent in the Army and subsequently the Red Cross to help. We will do so with all provinces working together to protect seniors.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, now over 10,000 Canadians have lost their life to COVID-19. One of those people is Denis Mathieu. His family sold their home so they could afford to put him in a long-term care home. He ended up losing his life on October 16th. The long-term care home was owned by the federal government and is for-profit. Now, my question is very simple. This is not about jurisdiction, this is about responsibility. Will the Prime Minister commit to protecting people in homes owned by his government?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, every Canadian deserves to be able to age in dignity, in safety, and in good health. That is something that we all, regardless of our political affiliations, regardless of the order of governments in which we serve, can agree on. That's why through this pandemic, as we've seen the terrible tragedies families and individuals have faced, have been doing as much as we can to be there. And we will continue to. We will continue to work with the provinces. We will continue to ensure that equipment is sent and that support is given. We will ensure that best practices are shared. We will protect our seniors.